Okay, so it's currently like 1 in the morning, and I had to figure out how to get my Mac to record audio. Long story short, Mac is weird. Yes, I'm in my pajamas. Yes, I just got out of the shower. So we're going to record the part 3. I already recorded it once, but then I realized one of my things that I mentioned in the video was actually wrong at the competition. One of the things in the video had to do with this cube shape in particular, and I was wrong about it. Anyways, that's relevant because you never saw that video. So I was gonna make it earlier, but if you can't tell, my camera doesn't do a good job distinguishing yellow and white, like especially if it's like this. You can't tell the difference. However, you can tell the difference with that. You can't really tell where the cube is, but you can tell the difference. And this came in today. So basically, if you understand if you understand tracing and how all that works, then you can skip parts 1 and 2 of this video tutorial series. If you don't, then you should watch them. They're not all that helpful. You can probably learn it better from someone else. Anyway, so we have a Square-1. That's important. You see right here, I've got this Google Sheet pulled up, and it shows how you can set up reference schemes. So that's fine and dandy. So you need to know how to at least be able to trace to a certain cube shape in order to be able to just know how to trace it in general. That being said, you can come up with your own tracing schemes if you use tracing, and if you use scales, I don't know how that works, but as long as you can tell odd and even, you're fine. So this is the sheet. It shows how to set things up. This may be the way that you want to go. You may want to go through manually and do a setup like this. So in the case for the first one, this one has a setup, and it says it's this alg. Right? So we trace it to this. And you have the other colors on the side, whatever. But you trace it to this. This is one way to go about it, and you can just trace it to that. Or if you want to just skip the tracing because it's your first time dealing with this cube shape, what you can actually do is just test your normal alg. So we have this right here. This is where we trace it to, and we know that this is where we trace it to. So we're going to try a normal alg to solve it. So we have it set up to here. Now we're going to just solve the Square-1, making sure to keep it in cube shape the whole time, or at least doing things that we know will not cause parity. So we have W edge, and W edge does not have parity. I'm going to try to fix this lighting real quick. I actually think my problem is that I have too much light. Anyway, so we can do that, and so now we know that because that was our reference scheme, that's definitely what our even tracing would be, that we can that our normal alg for it is the even alg. Now, it's possible that our normal alg would be the odd alg. And if that's the case, then we need to figure out the even alg. But right now, for this example, we're going to show finding the odd alg. So, what we're going to do is we're going to do the setup again. So we have our setup. This is the very basic way of doing this. When I was doing this, I skipped this because it's not necessary entirely. I mean, you should still check it, but yeah. So you have this. I need to figure out a way to change the tracing. Now what we'll do is we'll apply these things that I'm going to call a parity switch. I might call them other things throughout the video, but that's just what I'm going to call it. So, within this case, if we have a star shape, you can change parity by doing a 2 on the star. Okay? So, also, I forgot to mention this earlier, if you don't have a black stickerless one, if you don't have black and white, just pretend these colors or whatever. It honestly does not matter which color is which, as long as you recognize them as different colors. Yeah. And the reason is because obviously there are only 2 colors on each side, and if you swap all of them, like you just swap which color you're doing. So let's say you want this to be white and this to be black in this instance, along with all of the other ones, of course. We swapped them. In our tracing, that would not affect parity at all because it's 8 pieces swapped with 8 pieces, which is an even number of swaps. Anyways, in this case, we could change parity by doing a 2. So it's a parity switch. And now if we solve it, we have A on top, and on the bottom we have an adjacent corner swap. Fun fact, that's called PJ. It's just where these 2 corners are swapped. And so, since A does not have parity and PJ has parity, we now have parity after on the setup applying a parity switch, which means that we know that the parity switch worked. Obviously, we know that the parity switch works. Forgive me for taking so long. I ate a bag of parity stuff, and it's 1:30 in the morning. So, that's one way of doing it, if you like the doc. Also, the doc's kind of nice in the event that, let's say you can't find an alg or you're stuck on an alg, it can give you algs. Now, your odd and even might be switched if you don't use the same reference scheme. I know I don't use the same reference scheme. So keep that in mind. They sometimes will, they sometimes won't. I found some of them need to be swapped, some of them don't. That's irrelevant though, as long as you have a separate one for each. So basically, what we've gone over so far is that we go to the setup, we solve it using a normal alg. If our normal alg gives parity, then that's our odd alg. If our normal alg doesn't give us parity, that's our even alg. And then to find the other one, you apply a parity switch somewhere along the sequence. In this case, it was the first thing. Other cases won't be the same way. So, how did I personally do this? Well, I didn't like going through the sheet. I didn't care for the algorithms. There were some algorithms that I learned, but I actually learned them from Brandon Lynn's video series that I would follow. I didn't follow it for the tracing. The tracing was irrelevant. I didn't do it specifically for this alg is this alg is this. Some of them were actually swapped on me, and because of that, the way that I think about cases are very annoying. So, anyway, what I used was this thing called SquadMate. This is how it works. So we can go through select individual cases right here. My computer's okay, actually maybe it's not. But so we can choose a case, so let's choose a case to start off with. Shield, sure. Now we're going to choose what the other one is. And it works flipped. Like if you choose shield scallop, then scallop shield will also appear. Because they're the same shape. So let's do shield square. Okay. Now you'll probably want to deselect them all beforehand, because I think some of them show up on there. So we're going to click now New Scramble, and it does this, and you see right here it has the scramble. The blue stuff is when it shifts the cube shape, so it's when it leaves the cube shape. So we're going to apply the algorithm. My hands, I just got out of the shower, so they're kind of slippery. My turning is turbo right now. So we've got the scramble right here, and theoretically, we know how to trace shield, right? And if we don't, we can come up with our own tracing scheme, or we can go to the dock and apply the setup and see how we would trace it from there. There's really no reason to do that. If you understand tracing well enough, you can come up with your own tracing scheme quicker than going to the dock. Yeah. So we'll start tracing this. So for me, I'm going to trace it like this. 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1. So I got odd. So also, I'm kind of slow right now with my tracing. Never had a stickerless black puzzle before. Well, I had like a spray painted one, but I never really used it. Anyways, so I had 1 on here. So I'm going to try my standard alg, which is this. Okay, I'm gonna solve it. This camera situation isn't the greatest. I'm gonna solve it. And I have right now V R. So I have no parity. And so this was an odd tracing that I had, and it did not give me parity, which means that the case that I learned, well, the case for this case, shield square, when I get odd, I'll use my normal algorithm. Now, it's not always going to be the case, so let me just give myself parity right now. And now, I'll come back here, I'll invert my algorithm, or I can even just do a new scramble until I get parity. It doesn't matter. Oh crap, that was not the button I wanted to push. I've never clicked that button before. But yeah, keep new scrambling until you get parity. You can even go right here into this option right here. Repeat with same parity, repeat with opposite parity, repeat and flip top and bottom layers. You can do either. You can do that as well if you want to just solve it and then get one with the flip parity. But this one I know has a different parity. And I'm just going to trace it again because if we're learning it, we're not familiar with tracing it. So obviously tracing it again is good. It also confirms whether or not you inverted the cube shape the same way, if you just invert the cube shape. In which case I did just invert the cube shape, but I know I can trust myself well enough to know that I did correctly invert it the same way that I did it before. But if you do it the way that I just did it, which is kind of a lazier way, you do want to trace it again just to make sure you did it right. So I'll trace it. 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0. So yes, we have an even number. So I'm not going to try my old alg because I'm pretty certain that I did it all correct before the first time with my normal alg. And on 1, and there was no parity. So now that we have a 0, so I might interchange 1, 0 with even, odd. 1 is odd, O is even. Anyway, so I'm not going to do the same alg. What I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a shift to the alg. Now this case is a great example of a stupid case. I don't like this one. So normally it's a 3-slice cube shape. If you have parity, it's slightly longer in this instance. Not all of them are, but this one is. And what we have to do is, let's look that up now. This one. Okay. If we look at the diagram of cube shapes right here, and we can find, I have no idea how well this shows up on the stream, but we can find shield square right here. I sure hope this shows up well. I'm going to zoom in just to be safe. So we have shield square right here. Now, there's no real good way to shift it just going down to here. We can't shift it, at least to my knowledge, can't shift it on this level on a 3-slicer. This doesn't reduce to any of the 3 slicers. It only reduces to 4 slicers and a 1 slicer. And this 1 slicer we also can't apply a switch from. Although we kind of can. So there are a few ways we can go here to here, and then apply a switch here, come back here to here, or we can go here. Let's see if I actually don't know if that's an option. Yeah, we want to go here to here, switch to here to here to here. So that's, if you count it, so before it's normally 3 slices, now it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We doubled the slices. It sucks. But it's what we got to do. So we have our cube shape, and we're going to go and find a way to reduce it. Well, to apply the thing. So what we're doing is we're reducing it to what will be the next step, which is fist in the cube shape reductions, and we're going to change it to something that we're going to change it to something that we can do a parity switch on, which is pawpaw. So we're in pawpaw now, and we're going to do a parity switch. A parity switch for this case is bringing these 3 corners over the slice, and these 3 corners over the slice, and then doing a slice. That is a parity switch. If you have 3 corners over a slice, and you're switching with another 3 corners, and you do a slice, that'll change the parity. So we're going to undo the move. In this case, that's the only way that you normally solve it, but it is important that when you go out of your way a little bit of the normal cube shape algorithm, that you undo the way that you got there to do the switch the same way. And then we're going to solve it from here. And now there's no parity, and we can confirm that by solving. And if you see, actually I don't know what these algos are called, so you have up, or we can even just go ahead and solve it. But yeah, no parity. So that's kind of the idea that you would go about this. Now we kind of just have to learn all the parity switches. There aren't that many that I know of. But then again, you can also think of any direct algorithm as a switch, because you can just get it to a certain part and then have one way solve parity and one way solve the other. But yeah, another thing to note is that instead of just applying a switch, sometimes, and I'm not entirely sure how often this happens, I don't usually use this one when learning it, you can just take a different route. As you can see, like if you have this one, paw square, you can go this way, or you can go that way, and they both have different reductions from there. You can solve it other ways and then how it affect parity that way. Something to note though is most people, they learn cube shaped through a tree or something like this, or they learn it intuitively. Most people don't learn all however many algs are. I think it's like 99. I'm not entirely sure. It's not an important number in my opinion. Anyway, so basically you need to make sure when you're doing your alg, so when you're going through either with the sheet and the setup to do your standard alg, or through SquadMate to do your standard alg, that what you're doing is consistent every time. There are some examples like I know there are better ways of doing this. Sorry. This cube shape, I don't know what that's called. And this. You actually, so this sucks. You actually get different parities if, so what you normally do is you break up like two edges here and put that in. So you have that on the bottom. You get a different parity breaking it up that way than you do if you break it up that way. And you think, oh, well, just depending on the scramble, I would do it differently. But you need to make sure that you keep track of which way you're doing it in the alg. Now, when I solve, especially before I did CSP, I would always try to make sure that I preserved corner orientation. It was a fairly easy thing to do. And if you notice right here on the bottom, actually this is not the best one to show, but okay. So if I saw this, I would normally try to preserve these corners. When making the kite on the bottom for scallop kite, I'd get those and I'd bring that over to the bottom. Now, and if I'm doing CSP, I might have to bring these down. And you need to make sure that you're doing that, that what you're doing is consistent. That's the point. Consistency. There's you don't have to be 100% consistent, and there are sometimes a few different options, and they sometimes don't change the parity, but you need to make sure that you know what those are and how they affect parity before just freely doing things. So let's get on to some switches. This is, I guess, a good place to start. So we have this. Now we can get one parity by bringing. So you see right here we have this part of the kite, and we're going to bring it down to this part of the kite like this for scallop kite. Well, we can change it by also having it bring down like this, as long as you're like moving both. And you can extend this pretty easily to just kind of having a multi-move switch with scallop kite by having that be your switch. It's a pretty easy switch to execute. I'm sure my face being close to the mic doesn't make it annoying. But yeah, that's a switch. Like I've said already, having the three corners line up over a slice so that they switch like that, that's a parity switch. I did mention that in the star cases, that doing that as a switch. Something to note also is that here it's better to extend like this. If you're tracing like this, doing a Y2 rotation also will apply a parity. And the reason for this one actually is pretty simple. So nothing changes right here. You still would trace it from this angle. Like, I mean, even if it's right here, we still trace it like that. If we trace it like, you know, and the slices right here, we still would trace it that way. But the reason that it changes is because this is cut in half. This swaps with this. This swaps with this. This swaps. So there's a swap this way, and this way. That's 3 swaps, which is odd, which applies parity. That's what a Y2 does. It's basically the same thing as doing 1, 2, 3, which applies parity. Those are really the only 3 that I know of. I don't really use any others, but they're pretty useful. Oh, actually, no, I can think of another one now. Okay, let me set it up. Okay, let me think about how this one is. This is not working. Why can't I get this to work? Okay, well, there's this one right here, doing the alg to scalp kite like this is different than doing the same, basically the same thing from here. That's a switch, effectively. Let me try to find this one. Let me switch to this. Okay, it's a pop something. Oh, I guess this is another one. Depending on which way you make the paw, it affects parity. Okay, this is the one I've been looking for. Okay. If you have this right here, that affects parity, different than having it done like this and then doing basically like a D2 on the bottom. That affects it. That's a parity switch. I just realized I've been saying that affects parity in place of what I should probably be saying is calling it just a parity switch. Just keep in mind when rewatching the video, because you're probably going to have to do that now, sorry, that's what I meant, unless you understood it the first time, which is great. I know some of the star cases, they're just kind of like really annoying when you execute them upside down versus not upside down. I feel like, for me at least, they sometimes switch. Yeah. Also, keep in mind mirrors. For example, oh, why can't I get this? I don't know that one. Okay, well, some mirrors have different parity algorithms, and that's just how it is. And so you're going to want to keep track of what is good and bad for those. So this is something that has a mirror. This is good fist, and the mirror is bad fist. There's probably, I think they're called like right and left fist, but the way I have them, I think about them is good fist, bad fist, bad paw, good paw. It's arbitrary, you can call them whatever you want, but it helps with the separating of the cases. And that's really it. If I don't end the video now, I don't know if I ever will. But the main idea is parity switches. That's the key as to why you don't need to learn any more algs after you learn full cube shape. I hope this was useful. I hope that at least one person that with decent video making skills was able to completely understand everything I said in the video and make their own better video, because quite honestly, I think my whole video series is garbage. But it's the content that I'm trying to put out there to spread Square-1 literacy and hopefully make this easier for other people.